Yesterday, President Trump gives the speech on Constitution Day in which he says we need to stop teaching critical race theory and 1619 Project nonsense and Howard Zinn in our public schools. And people just, they threw a bleep fit. I mean, they just went nuts over this. Now, here is the basic rule that I have when it comes to federal education. I think that the federal government should not be involved in education. I think the Department of Education should be abolished. The reason I believe this is because the same federal Department of Education capable of telling states to teach good history is similarly capable of telling the states to teach quite bad history or to teach Common Core. It seems to me that education should be devolved to the lowest level, meaning that you should be able to control education in your local community or at the state level. I mean, in an ideal world, obviously, you would have community schools that are directly funded by parents and by members of the community, whether it's parochial schools or whether it's private schools or whether it's charter schools. But in any case, if the federal government is to be involved in the business of education, certainly it has a stake in people not learning false history and pseudo-history and history directly designed to undermine the foundations of the United States, because then we lose all commonality. So here was Trump going after critical race theory and the 1619 Project.
The left is attempting to destroy that beautiful vision and divide Americans by race in the service of political power. By viewing every issue through the lens of race, they want to impose a new segregation, and we must not allow that to happen. Critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda, ideological poison that, if not removed, will dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together.
Fact check, absolutely true. I mean, someone could write a book about it. Oh, wait, I did. How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps, if you want the long version of Trump's speech with a full chapter on a more accurate history of the United States and what that would look like, including all of the dark spots in American history, including the mistreatment of Black Americans, the mistreatment of American Indians, and all the rest. Okay, he is correct about this. This is toxic stuff, suggesting that America has no foundational principles, which is what CRT says, that all the foundational principles are basically just a pasteboard fabric that is designed to obscure deeper, evil attempts to install racial and class hierarchies. It's disgusting, and it destroys the country. And he is exactly right about this. Any country that hopes to survive has to share a philosophy, has to share a history, has to share a culture. CRT, 1619 Project, they're aimed directly at this. Now, it used to be, by the way, that the Nicole Hannah-Jones of the world would fully admit this. Right? Nicole Hannah-Jones literally tweeted this out about the 1619 Project back in July. Quote, "I've always said the 1619 Project is not a history. It is a work of journalism that explicitly seeks to challenge the national narrative and therefore the national memory. The project has always been as much about the present as it is the past. In other words, we want to shift how Americans think about America dramatically, right? We don't want to shade it. We don't want to remind them of bad things. We want to completely shift the narrative. She's a radical. It's an incredibly negative thing. The fact that she won a Pulitzer for a project that is so bad it was fact-checked and she refused to change the facts, she's awful. And the fact that they made her the de facto editor of the New York Times demonstrates where our media are at and where the far left are at. Or the mainstream left, I should say, at this point. Okay, so Trump continued. He said it is child abuse to teach critical race theory to kids. This is 100% true again. Teaching a child of any ilk that in a free country, you are a victim. And that you're inherently a victim because the systems will victimize you. The systems are out to get you. There is no greater act of viciousness you can visit upon a child than teaching a child that no matter how hard you work, you are bound for failure. That is a vicious thing to teach a child. I have 3 children. Last I checked, we all live in the United States. My kids are Jewish, as it turns out. And it turns out that the number 1 group in the United States targeted for hate crimes are Jews. Do you think that I'm telling my 6-year-old that no matter what you do in the United States, you will not succeed? First of all, I can't tell my kids that because it's an overt lie. But beyond that, it is an act of deep, abiding immorality to teach people that they are victims of systems they cannot see, especially when that is not true. It turns out that when people are victims of systems, you typically can see it. Right? Jim Crow is a system where you can point at it and say, you're a victim of the system because they literally will not allow you to go to that school across the street because of your race. That is a fairly obvious situation in which you're a victim of the system. Even in that situation, the most successful people are people who don't think of themselves as victims. Being a victim is not being a hero. Overcoming victimhood is heroism. Reveling in the fact that there are obstacles in life is the least likely thing to lead you to a successful life. And it happens to be an overt lie in modern America. So here is Trump saying that CRT is effectively child abuse. This is ideologically correct.
Critical race theory is being forced into our children's schools. This is offensive and outrageous to Americans of every ethnicity, and it's especially harmful to children of minority backgrounds who should be uplifted, not disparaged. Teaching this horrible doctrine to our children is a form of child abuse in the truest sense of those words.
Okay, so Trump moves on and he calls for patriotic education. This is what drove everybody nuts. The minute you say patriotism to the left, the fact that the word patriotism is anathema to the left should tell you something about what the left believes about the country. Do you want to live in a country where the entire governing system, the people, the entire intelligentsia believe that being a patriot makes you a bigot? Because this is what people believe. I am not joking. Online, as soon as Trump said patriotic education, Hitler Youth trended yesterday on Twitter because he said that he thinks that Americans should be patriotic about the country and that kids should be taught to be patriotic about the country. Hitler Youth. That's insane. He is not saying that you should be patriotic about all of America's evils. He's saying you should be patriotic about America's founding documents, about our ideology, about our history. They should be patriotic and recognize the evils of American history. In the speech, he mentioned some of the evils of American history. But the media deliberately overlooked that in order to declare that he was some sort of uber-nationalist, Deutschland über alles Nazi. It's insane. It's insane. Now wait, before you go, you have to know we are moving YouTube channels. Videos like this one will only be available on my personal YouTube channel, Ben Shapiro, starting September 28th. Click on the link in the description to subscribe so you don't miss a beat.